As I said, I have a new question and theory for you today, which I think you will find provocative, controversial, and maybe even upsetting. What it is designed to do, however, is to make you think and to question. And my new question emanates from something I heard MSNBC's Chris Hayes say back almost a couple months ago. I recorded it and I've been saving it along with my initial reaction to it, curious to know if anyone else would dare go there. To date, not one single solitary person I've heard has gone there. I will go there. First, let's listen to what Chris said that led to my question.
7 weeks to go. We're in the stretch run of this campaign. Everyone's obsessing over swing state polling on their phones and various outlets' odds for who will win. And the reason for that obsession with the just 7 or 8 states, the new poll in Arizona, is, of course, that we don't elect our presidents by a popular vote in this country. We have a, frankly, undemocratic system, the Electoral College. It's the reality of how American elections for president have worked for more than 230 years. And our citizens and our parties and our candidates, everyone who's operating covering the election, works within these constraints. That's how it works. That's one of the sort of ground truths of this election. The other ground truth that defines this election and the campaign right now is that one of the two candidates has shown us and told us he will not commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Harris-Walz's campaign is, I think it's fair to say, running uphill, in other words. The thing is, the only option for Kamala Harris and Democrats and the pro-democracy coalition, Popular Front, the only thing they can do is to organize and mobilize and persuade voters, use democratic means to save democracy. And if they win, they can and should strongly defend that victory in court. And if they lose, which is a real possibility, they then must peacefully transfer power. That's the way it works. Those are the only options on the table.
Okay, and here's my question. Why? Why is the only option on the table for Joe Biden to peacefully transfer power? Why is it always up to us liberal Democrats to follow the rules, to respect the Constitution, especially when our opponent has said our Constitution should be terminated, and has further shown he has less than zero regard for rules, including the rule of law? But if Kamala Harris were to lose a week from today, the only option will be for Joe Biden to, what? Follow the rules? Abide by the Constitution and turn the United States government over to someone who says he wants to terminate the Constitution? Tell me in what world that makes sense. And don't get me wrong, I am not in any way, shape, or form calling for another attack on our Capitol. That would take precious time away from our stereotypical liberal tree hugging. But here's what I am calling for. Earlier this year, back in July, when the Supreme Court issued their presidential immunity ruling, it didn't just apply to Donald Trump. It applied to Joe Biden as well. And how many times has Biden taken advantage of his newly granted immunity since July? I've been watching closely, and I haven't seen even a hint or a sniff of one such instance or example. He didn't order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his opponent, which was actually one of the questions Trump's legal team was asked, and they did not respond by saying, "Oh, come on, that's ridiculous." Quite the opposite. Joe Biden has done squat with his newfound presidential immunity. So, further to my question, if Trump were to win, wouldn't that be a good time to exercise your presidential immunity, Joe? Consider, are you really going to turn the country over to a 34-count convicted felon? To an adjudicated rapist? Someone who's been charged under the RICO mob boss law? You going to turn the country over to someone who's been charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States by trying to steal an election he lost and erase the will and votes of 81 million people in the process? Someone who incited a vicious, unpatriotic attack on our Capitol and then did nothing while it was taking place and said his vice president deserved to be hanged? You're going to turn the country over to someone who's been charged with espionage, someone who stole sensitive nuclear documents and then waved them around in front of someone he knew did not have the proper clearance to see them. And God only knows who he sold them to and for what in return. And someone who ignored a legal subpoena for over a year in the process and tried to destroy evidence of his treasonous criminality. You're going to obey the Constitution and turn the country over to someone who said our Constitution should be terminated. To a guy who calls those of us on the left the enemy within, who should be handled by the American military. And that includes you, Joe. You're at the top of the list. Someone who calls the free press the enemy of the American people. He just did it again a couple times over the weekend in 2 separate locations. He did it again yesterday. Someone who, when we were short on COVID tests, sent them to one of our avowed enemies in Russia who wants nothing more than to see American democracy fail. That is who you're going to turn the country over to? You're really going to follow the Constitution for a guy you know wants to terminate it? Again, I ask, on what planet does that make any sense? In my humble opinion, here's what I have concluded Joe should say if Trump were to be declared the winner. Joe could say, and by the way, in a primetime address from the Oval Office, quote, "My fellow Americans, my fellow patriotic Constitution-loving Americans, I cannot in good conscience turn control of this country over to this man, who is the polar opposite of what this country stands for. I call this country the finest in the world. He calls it a garbage can. I believe in the rule of law. He breaks the law whenever he sees benefit to him and him alone from so doing. I believe in our judicial system. He tears it down every chance he gets, again, when he sees benefit to him and him alone from so doing. I care about our founding documents. He said our Constitution should be terminated. I care about the consequences to the American people from such brazen lawlessness. He only cares how the consequences affect him and him alone, and the welfare of our nation be damned. I don't see the American people, even those who disagree with me, as my adversaries. He calls anyone who disagrees with him the enemy within, and has stated that if necessary, they should be handled by the American military. I respect the independence of our Department of Justice. He wants the Attorney General to be his attorney. I respect the independence of our free press. He calls them the enemy of our people. I respect our Constitution. He says it should be terminated. I respect our foundational transfer of power. He incited an attack on our Capitol in order to steal an election he lost. I respect our democracy. The people that know him best call him a fascist. If I follow the Constitution, he will destroy it. And as I said, in all good conscience, I cannot let that happen. I cannot turn this constitutional republic over to someone who said he wants to terminate the Constitution. Therefore, I have come to the conclusion that it is far better and ultimately more patriotic that I will be the one who violates our Constitution, not destroys it, but violates the Constitution of this nation in order to preserve it. Of the two aberrations, I believe that a violation is the lesser of two evils when the alternative is its total destruction. Therefore, I am hereby invoking my presidential immunity in order to preserve this nation's democracy. Donald Trump will not become this nation's next president. I hereby also revoke the terms of his bail, make that bails, and further order the military police to take Donald Trump into custody, whereby he can finally stand trial for the myriad crimes he has committed against this country with which he has already been charged. Thank you. End quote. And then just walk away. Don't take any questions. Whatever you do, don't head back to the dais after a reporter inevitably asks you a question. Just walk away. Retire to whichever room with the TV you prefer and watch Trump and MAGA heads literally explode. And watch and listen as A, the rest of the free world stands up and applauds, and B, as the world's dictators recoil in horror. And again, I dread the prospect of this patently unfit criminal traitor winning this election. I hope Kamala Harris wins easily and makes everything I just said redundant. I will happily swallow it all back, whole, without even chewing. I just like to consider and prepare for all possible outcomes. But again, why do we Democrats always have to be the good guys? It's our constitutional right to appoint a Supreme Court justice. The right says, no, it's too close to an election. We say, okay. But then when it's their turn to appoint one and it is much closer to an election, they say, oh, that rule only applied to you, not us. And we say, okay, we're Democrats. We play by the rules, even though the other side threw the rule book in the garbage years ago. And I am well aware that everything I just said could be deemed radical. But again, I would ask, how in good conscience could Joe Biden turn this democracy over to a felon and a traitor who he knows full well wants to destroy said democracy? And this is what bugs me to no end. We still have 3 months left whereby we Democrats control the presidency and the Senate. And yet it is we who are wetting our pants over what Trump and the GOP will do if he gets back into the White House. Do you think they're worried about what we'll do in the next 3 months or even the next 4 years if Kamala Harris wins? Hell no. Well, I say we give them something to worry about. We let them know that liberal does not equate with patsy. We let them know that liberals can show up to a gunfight with something other than a spoon. Like, I don't know, maybe an M1 Abrams tank and a stealth bomber armed with nukes. I say we slap these bastards so hard, even Google won't be able to find them. Send them reeling back on their heels, so to speak. Let them know that we have finally digested and then rejected the old phrase, nice guys finish last, except when it comes to sex. You guys think you're the only ones who don't have to play by the rules? Here, hold our beer. And when any Republican legislator asks any Democrat about Biden's pronouncement, they should all just shrug their shoulders and say, presidential immunity, bitches. You had multiple chances to stop him, including 2 impeachments. But you chose to leave your balls at home in your wife's panty drawer and then just walk away. So anyway, that's my piece, my theory, and my question. And to date, I have not seen or heard anyone even hint at anything even close to that. And I hope that's one of the primary reasons you watch and listen to this show, because you will hear things here that you will not hear anywhere else. And so, if Trump wins, what should Joe Biden do? I've just told you what I think he should do. And again, while it might sound radical, I swear I am not being hyperbolic. I emphatically believe and meant every single word, every syllable I just spoke. Any comments you have on that are welcome. You can call the show in our second half hour, which we're into now, or you can email me at doug@dougbasham.com. The phone number here at the station is area code 702-221-7283. That's area code 702-221-SAVE, as in, yes, save our democracy. Joe, exercise your presidential immunity. And by the way, I think Biden should start teasing that now, today, and especially after the election if Trump is successful in stealing it. And yes, any victory that is built upon a campaign of heinous lies, not to mention bigotry, hatred, and racism, is a theft. Biden could say to reporters, what was it the Supreme Court said back in July I had? Wasn't it something about presidential immunity? My memory is not as good as it once was. I am Sleepy Joe after all. But yes, I am recalling, it's coming back to me now, that it was indeed about presidential immunity. So I'll tell you, I'm real excited to start using that new power for once. And that's it. And when reporters invariably ask, what are you talking about, Mr. President? He could wink at them, put on his beloved aviators, and say, stand back and stand by.